Thank you for joining Jackson Lewis as we take a closer look at the employment law trends and tactics sure to shape 2023. This installment is one of 12 concise, field-specific podcast episodes that are part of our annual forecasting favorite, The Year Ahead. We invite you and others at your organization to experience the report's legislative, regulatory, and litigation insights in full at our website, jacksonlewis.com, or listen to the podcast series at whichever platform you turn to for compelling content.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to 2023, the year ahead, and we're covering in this segment, OSHA, what's coming up in 2023. My name is Courtney Malveaux, and I am a former labor commissioner. I used to enforce OSHA from the inside, and now I am the co-leader of the Workplace Safety and Health Practice Group for Jackson Lewis. And so I used to sign the citations, and now I defend people who receive them. And I have with me my partner and also co-leader of our practice group, Melanie Paul. And she also comes from inside the agency, really from the solicitor's office. And she was one of the top attorneys who would take cases on behalf of OSHA. And now we have our practice group and we represent clients on all things OSHA. And so there are a lot of hot topics that are coming down the pike. And Melanie, what's your favorite subject that you'd like to talk about?
Well, Courtney, funny you should mention hot, because at the top of the agency's priority list is heat illness prevention. They threw that out there last year and have started the rulemaking process. They are kind of pushing that along, and they are pressing forward perhaps the beginning of this year on a small business review on how a standard might affect small businesses economically, which is part of the rulemaking process. And in the meantime, they have a national emphasis program for heat illness prevention in both indoor and outdoor environments, which covers a really wide breadth of industries, even unexpected ones like in office environments. And so employers really need to be on high alert for compliance with heat illness prevention in the workplace, because they may be targeted for on-site inspections much more readily now. Also, we're seeing an uptick in aggressive enforcement by this agency, by this particular administration. And that includes them working on an interim final rule for subpoena enforcement, which means they're going to bring more subpoenas against employers with the expectation that it becomes harder for employers to really challenge those. And they are looking for greater cooperation from employers to feed their enforcement agenda and to complete their investigations. So they're going to be using a lot more of those types of tools. And also with this aggressive enforcement that we're going to be seeing in 2023, they have made changes to the severe violator enforcement program. So more employers may find themselves on this severe violator list. And that means that they are going to be subject to more scrutiny by the agency. They are going to have to do more things to promote safety, to get off the agency's target list in that way. And really just we're expecting to see a lot more aggressive enforcement. But let me throw it back to you. What do you think the agency is going to be doing in 2023?
Well, you know what? I see that there are a couple of things that are coming down the pike. One of which is it's like Groundhog's Day. COVID's still top of mind at OSHA, and especially for healthcare employers. So as you know, and unfortunately, a lot of folks in the healthcare industry know that OSHA enforcement in healthcare employment sites has really ramped up. And it's also the subject of a national enforcement program. And in fact, re-inspections of healthcare work sites that initially happened when the pandemic broke out, they're coming back and re-inspecting them. And so that's been happening. And you may recall that there was in 2021 an emergency temporary standard just for healthcare employers. And so that expired at the end of 2021. And here we are in 2023, and OSHA has put forward to the Office of Management and Budget a new permanent COVID-19 standard for healthcare employers. So that's being reviewed. It's still under wraps. It's being looked at by a number of other agencies, but that should be coming out fairly soon in 2023. And so that's something to keep an eye on. An interesting thing about that is that it may or may not dovetail with CDC guidance. And it'll be interesting to see to the extent employers may be required to pay for employees while they're on medical leave if they are in isolation or if they have to quarantine. So that's something that's coming down the pike. And also in a similar vein, OSHA ultimately says it's going to come out with a permanent infectious diseases standard. And so that won't just be COVID. I do think that COVID really did kind of ramp up the urgency on that. But that's something that was initially considered 2 administrations ago. And now OSHA is looking at brushing that off and updating it consistent with our experience with COVID, but also to apply to infectious diseases more generally. You and I and our practice group, we've been telling folks, look, when OSHA comes and they're inspecting based on heat exposure, and that's indoor or outdoor heat illness, OSHA's looking for a written heat illness plan. And so we've been cranking those out for employers on a regular basis. And that's the first thing that I noticed that OSHA is going to be looking for. So that's something new, old, but also new that OSHA is really focused on right now.
Yeah, and Courtney, that infectious disease rule is the plan is to include things like tuberculosis, MRSA, pandemic flu. So we're going to have to wait and see what that looks like. But that has been on this administration's regulatory agenda for some time. You know, part of their agenda has really sort of been stalled while they've been working through all the COVID stuff, and that healthcare final rule for COVID is coming this year, and we're gonna be dealing with that for some time if that becomes a permanent standard. So the other thing about the aggressive enforcement that we're seeing is that, of course, every year the agency increases the penalty amounts for citations to be consistent with inflation. It's now tied to inflation. And so the penalties are now increasing, and the maximum penalty for a serious and also an other than serious violation is $15,625 per violation. And for repeat and willful violations, that maximum is $156,259 per violation. And likewise for failure to abate, that is the same maximum as a serious and other than serious penalty of up to $15,625 per day beyond the abatement date, and that usually is up to 30 days. So those penalties can really, really rack up quickly. And of course, we don't want any employers to get inspections and violations, but there's a lot that they can do to prepare for that and to make sure that they've got their safety and health programs in place in anticipation of a compliance inspection. So Courtney, what else do you think is in store for employers in 2023 from OSHA?
Well, I'll tell you, Melanie, one thing, and it sounds like a sleeper, and it sounds like a very unexciting topic, but it's the OSHA logs and the electronic record keeping requirements. And so you may recall, 2 administrations ago, the OSHA had put forward a rule requiring employers to submit their OSHA 300 logs, which list every single injury and illness that's recordable on that log, and to do so electronically and submit it to OSHA, along with the OSHA 300A summary and the OSHA 301 report as well. And so that got scaled back amid litigation and pushback from industry to just submitting the OSHA 300A summary data. And so that's been in place since then for all employers, except those that are in exempt industries. But in most industries, it has been a requirement for anyone who has 250 or more employees. That is about to change. And so it's going to be expanded to include more employees. So now the administration has proposed you not only are going to submit your OSHA 300-day summary, we're going to require 300 and 301 as well. And it's going to include more employers back to those who have only 100 employees. So those who have only 100 or more employees, they are going to be the fresh batch of employers that will have to actually submit these OSHA 300 logs to OSHA. And so that can catch a lot of folks. We see OSHA already saying that a large number of employers, very large numbers of employers that currently have to submit OSHA 300A summaries aren't doing so. And so what's going to happen when this starts to hit those smaller employers that have 100 or 100 or more employees? So that's something that I think is going to catch a lot of folks unaware that that's going to be a requirement.
And Courtney, that 250 employee and soon to be 100 employee threshold is per establishment, right? It's not per employer.
Right.
So that's maybe a little bit of a saving grace for some employers, depending on the size of a particular facility. But nevertheless, it is definitely going to expand the number of employers who have to electronically submit their OSHA record to OSHA, to the agency. One of the other requirements of the new rule is likely to be that the employers are going to have to identify the legal name or the company name on the 300 log, whereas now they just use the establishment name, which could be a DBA, and it's not always clear, what the actual legal name is. And this is going to give OSHA more information about employers and try to match up records that they may already have about particular employers or businesses in their local regions. And so, employers are really should be concerned about this. The government is gaining more information about them, and how is the government going to use that? There's privacy concerns, obviously, with submitting employee names of employees who've been injured and become ill at work that are on the 300 logs, and they have personal information that are on the OSHA 301 incident reports. And so if this rule goes into effect, there are serious privacy concerns that were raised, several administrations ago when the rule first came about. And as a result of that litigation, as you suggested, the rule got scaled back, but this current administration wants to revive that. And so we'll have to see how that plays out. But I expect that there'll be litigation once again over this final rule when it gets published. So we'll have to see what comes of that. But it's, I think you're correct that a lot of employers don't really know that this is happening and that they may be affected by it. And so I think 2023 is going to be just a big year for OSHA enforcement and OSHA regulatory rulemaking like we've never seen before. And so employers really need to get ready, make sure their safety and health programs are in place and that they're complying and providing safe and healthful working environments for their employees. And we are obviously here to help them.
Thank you for joining us for the Year Ahead 2023 Special Edition podcast series. Please tune in to the next episode where we will continue to tell you not only what's legal, but what is effective. All of our Jackson Lewis podcasts are available to stream and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Libsyn, Pandora, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, and YouTube. For more information on today's topic, our presenters, and other Jackson Lewis resources, visit jacksonlewis.com. As a reminder, this material is provided for informational purposes only. It is not intended to constitute legal advice, nor does it create a client-lawyer relationship between Jackson Lewis and any recipient.